Bonjour et bienvenue vraiment à l'école de la fonction publique du Canada.
Good afternoon and welcome.
Event entitled Space-Based Earth Observation, How Satellites Grow Us Every Day. Something I am personally very passionate about and believe in strongly. Au nom de l'école, je souhaite la bienvenue à tous les participants.
In the name of the school, I would like to welcome all participants to this event.
Housekeeping items. We've had some sort of glitch today, that's why we're joining you a little bit late. And I have to share with you that we've been troubleshooting some internet issues on my end this morning. So if I'm glitchy or not coming through, my panelists are going to let me know, and I'll maybe turn off my video and try and improve that connection or go to an alternate device. And then for questions, tout au long de l'événement, vous pouvez
Throughout the event, you may submit your questions by clicking on the icon that looks like a raised hand, and there's someone monitoring the inbox, and we'll submit the questions to the panelists.
I frame today's event with a short video, just to kind of bookend where space-based Earth observation is today. So let's go over to that video now.
From space, we see deep into the heart and veins of our ever-changing planet. Pictures of Earth are worth more than 1,000 words. They are the blueprint for our future. To unlock the full potential of space's unique vantage point, we've created powerful tools. Tools that gather valuable data. Data that enables farmers to efficiently manage water and fertilizer for stronger food yields. Data that scientists use to monitor ticks and mosquitoes that carry harmful diseases. Data that first responders use to find the fastest routes to save lives. That's only a glimpse of what we can do today. In the future, when combined with AI and powerful computing, a broader range of space data would generate infinite solutions for Canadians. Imagine a future where we can use space data to better understand and predict the impacts of climate change, like rising sea levels, extreme weather, wildfire risk, and flooding. Measure the health of our forests and create predictive maps of pest damage and burn extent. Produce real-time dynamic navigation routes to protect whales and other endangered species. Ensure security and sovereignty in Canada's vast Arctic. Tomorrow's challenges require investing in innovative solutions today. Earth observation is key to securing economic opportunities and improving the lives of Canadians. Together, we can define Canada's future.
All right, so now that you have a little bit of context for today's conversation, let's start to shift over to our panelists. One thing that's common between all of our speakers today is that they come from different departments, of course, but they're connected through their reliance on space data, which is critical to accomplish their work. And as you saw in that video, the Government of Canada is becoming increasingly reliant on space-based Earth observation. You may be aware that not too long ago, about a year and a half ago, we launched a new RadarSat constellation mission. And those satellites are vital to 61 Government of Canada services across 11 different departments. So we can only give you a snapshot of what the government is using space for today, but this will give you some idea. And also, of course, this is impacting our daily lives for each and every one of us in Canada. So today, I have the great pleasure to host a whole of government panel discussion on space data and its significance for Canada. And I want to introduce these different departments and these experts. So our first speaker today will be Roger Diabrio, Acting Deputy Director for Canadian Center, or Canada Center for Remote Sensing, and Natural Resources Canada. And then we'll have Brad Durnford, Ice Superintendent, Canadian Coast Guard, Lieutenant Colonel Catherine Marchetti, Commanding Officer, Canadian Forces Joint Imagery Center, Dr. Heather McNairn, research scientist at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. And finally, and not least, Shannon Kea, Senior Policy Advisor, Meteorological Service of Canada from Environment and Climate Change Canada. So I'm going to ask them some questions, share with us a little bit about their roles in space. But as we go through that, I have three things for you, the audience, the viewers, to focus in on, kind of your homework for today. And from my perspective, these are the important things I really want you to take home from today's messaging. One is demand. You should notice today that we have an increasing reliance and an increasing efficiency of services that are delivered by and supported by space. In fact, we expect economy around space services to triple in the next 20 years. So the first one was demand. The second one is global. In the past, we've created a lot of regional solutions using space, but shifting availability of technology and satellite orbits, as well as some ingenuity, are making it such that solutions that could just be regional can really be global solutions. And so focusing on the global potential for space is the second one. And then along with that is the economy, and that's related to exports. If we're solving Canadian problems with global solutions, we can export these solutions, and it's a huge potential for our economy. So increasing demand, global, and exports are the things I'd like you to focus on today. All right, let's jump over to Roger. So Roger, you've worked with many departments at the Government of Canada over many years, and you've seen the evolution of satellites within our country. So you've got a great perspective you can share with us. Can you just tell us, what are the highlights of that history, and where did we start, and why, in your opinion, is it important for Canada? So over to you.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeremy. Next year, the center I work in, the Canada Centre for Remote Sensing, it's going to celebrate its 50th anniversary. And the establishment of that center around Earth observation back in the early 70s was really the government recognizing that how important space and space-based Earth observations were going to be to Canada. I like to say we're not, Canada's not Switzerland. We can't get in a truck and drive border to border to see what's going on. It's just impossible. Our landmass is too big. The coastal waters we're responsible for are immense. And the only way we can do it in an efficient way, in an effective way, is from a perch like space. And from these early investments in the 70s, Canada, in terms of milestones around Earth observation, began to invest in the ground stations, these satellite dishes across the country to bring the satellite data down. It made a decision to invest in and operate its first Earth observation satellite, RadarSat, to monitor Canada's north and its coastal areas. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about the RadarSat program. And importantly, industries and expertise, Canadian expertise around Earth observation began to build in the 70s. So we had the beginning of important companies such as McDonald Detweiler Associate that came up with the first ways to digitally process an image, the way we can build ground stations to bring the data down, and then today to build sensors, and such as the constellation you talked about, the RadarSat constellation mission that NDA was able to, with the Government of Canada, design and build. So all the way through the 70s and 80s, now, as we'll hear about it, Earth observation is a core service that underpins something, I understand, 60 to 70 services in the Government of Canada.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Roger. Why don't we jump over to Heather? I have the same question for both Heather and your perspective. So both of your departments are fundamentally dependent on satellite data, but can you give us some insight into how exactly this data addresses your needs, but also Canadian needs? So a broad question, but let's start with you, Heather.
Thanks, Jeremy. And Roger, I was part of some of that history, so it's really incredible what we've been able to do over the last few decades. I want to begin with just a little bit of background. So the agriculture and agri-food sector is a very important part of the Canadian economy and is valued at about $143 billion. And in fact, Canada is the 5th largest exporter of agriculture and agri-food products in the world. As Roger mentioned, we have a great landmass, and that includes about 64 million hectares of farmland. And I like to put that in context. That's about 2.5 billion tennis courts worth of land. So that's, as Roger was saying, it's an incredible landscape to map and monitor. And we need information to help us understand what is the current status of that landscape and how is that landscape changing over time. And of course, that's where satellites come into play here. So we can use that data from satellites in many different ways. For example, providing information to help us understand both the short and long-term threats to agricultural production. And that information also helps us understand what's going on in the landscape so that we can document and demonstrate environmental stewardship of the agriculture sector in general. So I just have a few examples to demonstrate how we're using satellite data. The first is an operational activity at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. It's called the Annual Crop Inventory. So it's produced every year. We use more than 3,800 images in that crop inventory, both the Canadian satellites as well as satellites from all over the world to deliver that product. The map inventory tells us what crop is grown in every field across Canada. The map products are put up on the open data portal and are downloaded hundreds of times every month for a wide range of users. So we have more than 60 documented users. And I want to just give you a few examples of those. So that annual crop inventory is used in, for example, the Canadian crop yield forecaster, which provides us with in-season estimates or forecasts of crop yields for important crops for Canada. And those in-field or in-season forecasts helps us understand market access and as well food security planning. Second example, we need this information to understand how agriculture is impacting the landscape. So one example of that is on soil erosion and off-site runoff from agricultural land. So that kind of information from the crop inventory and other satellite data, we can use that in modeling to help us understand the impacts. And that allows us to target best management practices to reduce our environmental footprint. And a final example for the crop inventory is using those map products in verifying compliance for international environmental sustainability criteria. And that's important for Canadian producers because that verification helps open up markets globally for Canadian products. Canola is a good example of that. But we're not done. Science and innovation, we're always pushing and driving new uses of satellite data, and I wanted to close with a final example of that. Canola is a really important commodity for Canadian producers, and that accounts for $9.3 billion of exports of canola and canola products for Canada every year. Crop diseases are a really important threat, a really serious threat to crop production in Canada and elsewhere. And there's a particular disease, there are many, but there's one in particular that affects canola production in Canada called sclerotinia or white mold. And when that pathogen takes a foothold in canola fields, it can create losses of up to 50% in terms of yields on those agricultural, canola fields. So we're working with Canadian industry to see how Earth observation data can help. And a really good example of that is there are some risk factors we can get from satellite data. So how wet the soil is, understanding the crop rotation history in that particular field, and even identifying what growth stage the canola plants are in. And those are all risk factors for sclerotinia. So we're working with industry to wrap all of that Earth observation, all those Earth observation products into a disease risk tool that will help farmers understand whether their particular fields are at risk, that pathogen could take that foothold. And then that gives information in the hands of the producers to make decisions about whether they can take steps to mitigate that risk. But of course, sclerotinia, canola, that's one disease, one crop. We're looking at extending that disease tool to other serious threats, such as clubroot, a really important one for Canadian producers. And as well, working with Canadian industry, as Jeremy was saying, to see how can we export this knowledge, this technology, to not only help Canadian agriculture producers reduce these risks, but help to reduce those risks around the world. So those are just a few examples of some of the ways that we're using space data to help the agriculture sector.
Thanks for that, Heather. Some really neat thoughts in there. You were talking about disease, crop disease. It certainly reminded me of another area that I don't think we're going to elaborate on today, so I'll just mention it now. But we can do the same for other vectors for human disease, for example, or viruses like mosquitoes and ticks. And so we can monitor conditions and almost provide a tick and mosquito forecast for areas. And we can do this work from space in the exact same way that you're talking about doing it for crops. So some amazing potential there. Shannon, let's hear a little bit from you and your work. Same question, how exactly does space data address your needs, but of course our Canadian needs?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jeremy. And I'm very happy to be on this panel with my colleagues, many of whom I've worked with for years. So we do have the shared experience of seeing the evolution of Earth observation over the last couple decades. I'm at Environment and Climate Change Canada at the Meteorological Service of Canada, and ECCC is by far the largest user of SBEO in the federal government. That's mainly due to the huge volume of data that goes into our meteorological programs for environmental forecasts, warnings, and information services. It's really a very mature service. It's been around for decades, very advanced, and of course, fully operational. ECCC, has at least part of our mandate is to equip Canadians to be informed, to make decisions related to weather and water and climate. It's a pretty important mandate. We're all looking at our weather app every day and making decisions on a daily basis based on what the weather forecast is. And of course, that comes from space data. Other decisions as well. So, what to wear is one decision, but of course, this data also feeds into important emergency management decisions or to prevent economic loss due to extreme weather events. So really, really quite important. One of our main activities is the development of numerical weather prediction systems to forecast atmospheric and environmental conditions. We run some very complex models in a high-performance computing infrastructure that ingests millions of observations every day. We do have, of course, the ground-based infrastructure at Environment Canada for weather and climate and water monitoring. Very important, feeds millions of observations a day, every day into our programs. But in addition to that, we have another 12 to 13 million observations that go into our programs every day, and 90% of those are from space. So, suffice to say that it's critically important to our operations and services at Environment, certainly for the weather enterprise. We are also the largest users of RadarSat data. So on the weather side, those millions of observations that we get are mainly in the 99% range from foreign satellites. So Canada does not have our own Canadian assets for monitoring weather, but we do rely on foreign satellites. RadarSat, of course, is fully Canadian and something that we should be very proud of when we think about the space program in Canada. Often think about the Canadarm or the astronaut corps or our work in telecommunications, but certainly RadarSat is a program that's been fully operational for 25 years now, with RadarSat 1 launched in 1995, and as several have mentioned, the RadarSat Constellation mission now. So we use that operationally every day at Environment and Climate Change Canada for ice monitoring and oil pollution, as well as a range of other applications that are sort of growing in maturity. In addition to the operational services that we provide, we have a very strong science program that uses space-based Earth observation for a range of applications, from wildlife habitat assessment, inland and coastal water monitoring, air quality monitoring, you name it. We really have such a dependence on on space data. We couldn't meet our mandate without it. So it's really important for Environment Canada as we work to provide the information that Canadians need to make decisions about not only about what to wear on any given day, but bigger decisions than that about the environment.
Yeah, great stuff, Shannon. You know, when you were talking about RadarSat, just made me wonder if all of our audience understands that technology. It really is quite incredible. And just like space robotics, Canada, this has been a niche area for Canada since its inception, and we're leading experts in the world on this technology. And RadarSat, the cool thing about it is it allows us to look through all the visible moisture in the atmosphere, so we can look right through the weather. And you're going to hear it come up a few times today. We use it in a lot of different ways, that data, but the really neat part about it doesn't matter what's going on weather-wise, we can see what's going on the planet below it. Whereas a typical optical satellite obviously can't see through cloud. And so RadarSat gives us a really unique capability. I love, Shannon, that you touched on the international collaboration that's required to make space work. You know, one of the things that's just become so obvious to me is that a country's space strategy cannot be, replicate the entire globe's space capability for yourself. It's not economically feasible, especially for a country like Canada, but it just doesn't make sense. We're just putting more stuff in space, more space debris. And so collaborating globally on a space infrastructure has to be our mindset. Where could we add value? Example, RadarSat, a niche technology. Where can we add value that allows us access to our other allies or other nations' assets? And so I'm glad that you highlighted that for us. All right, let's jump over to Brad. Brad, it's really interesting for me learning about your experiences using space data. And you've traveled for years on ships using satellite data to help you navigate, especially through ice in the north. So if you could just tell us a little bit about how this space data is affecting or having an economic impact. And specifically, I was really interested in what you told us about told me about the St. Lawrence and also things like the Northwest Passage. So over to you, Brad.
Okay, so ice breaking in Canada comes with two different seasons, of course. Winter in what we call the southern part of Canada from December to May. Our icebreakers break ice from St. John's all the way up to Montreal and into the Great Lakes. And in the summer months, where our icebreakers go north to the Arctic, where they open ports and help vessels up there. Our the main core process or intentions for icebreaking are helping vessels through the ice. We do that through various methods, or especially using space-based data in this day and age. We get daily RadarSat pictures, working very closely with our partners in ECCC. We interpret these pictures, looking at where the ice is currently. We plan our routes through or around the ice. We give that to our clients. They can safely navigate in and out of different ports. Also, if the ice is too bad, we of course have to escort them. So then our own icebreakers use the data that's given to look hourly at the best route through or again around the ice. It all depends on how bad the ice conditions are. The economic impact of our work includes, such as you said, Jeremy, in the St. Lawrence River. Just for instance, keeping ships moving for the 3 months that winter sets in really hard in eastern Canada and on the lakes. You're looking at keeping thousands of ships moving for that time period. You're supporting tens of billions of dollars of economic impact between just the Saguenay River and the Port of Montreal alone. You're looking at tens of thousands of jobs that are enabled to keep going when they don't have to shut down these businesses because their shipping methods are still going. For instance, one ship replaces hundreds of rail cars. So just by moving one ship in and out of St. Lawrence, that's 100 cars of train that doesn't need to run. The overall impact, I mean, for the St. Lawrence is annually, you're looking at 200,000 jobs between Canada and US that are maintained by keeping traffic going. So we position vessels accordingly throughout the year. That's in the southern waters. We're like constantly watching the data every day, constantly looking at radar sat pictures. Where is the ice? Where's the ice moving? We look at potential issues such as ice jams. You know, if the ice jams on the St. Lawrence River, we could end up with flooding situations. So our icebreakers have to break those up before the problem starts with flooding. In the summer months, when we go north, we support the resupply of isolated communities in the north. Like we need people to go to different communities up there that are still covered in ice underwater. So we have to assist vessels in and out to make sure we get their goods in for that year. They only have a short time period in the summer when there's no ice there, or the ice is melting. There may be a period of no ice, and then it starts freezing again within a few weeks, usually. So by helping the boats get in earlier, we can supply those towns with the goods they need for the entire year, because they can only get so much air freight, but the boats are the core of getting that resupply done up there. We're also always providing search and rescue coverage, which when there's ice, you need an icebreaker to help to get through it. We're several things like that with the Northwest Passage. We're looking at, everyone talks about the ice is getting less and less. Of course, we see a downward trend in ice concentrations over the years, but there are still years when there is ice in the Northwest Passage. It's impassable. Just a couple of years ago, the heavy ice on the Western Arctic cut off the access in. So we had a lot of traffic were impacted, and we were escorting in and out. And just keeping traffic moving is a big part of our job in the Arctic, as well as the Arctic resupply, and just maintaining that Canadian presence in the Arctic. Having that red and white flag up there on the side of the ships is a major reminder of what water it is.
So, Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, from my perspective, what you're saying, loud and clear here, is that we are able to move more effectively on the water with ice because of space-based Earth observation than we could before these assets. That's a fair statement, right?
Definitely, yes. We get daily images now with the radar constellation mission. I've seen a big uptick in the data that's available to me and my team to run the program, to better position the boats, to make sure we're on sign, we're where we need to be to assist any vessels that could potentially get in problems. We do a lot of reactive work, but there's also proactive in there too, that we can see where there may be potential issues with heavier ice, so we can move ships around to better be able to respond quicker, keep that traffic moving. But a big part of our job these days, or a big part of our data that we're using, is satellite imagery.
And so, one of the things for me is that, we used to do a lot of this stuff. We used to have weather forecasts. We used to move ships through ice without satellite data. But the point is that we have made a concerted effort to leverage space to do these things now, because it is more cost effective and it is just more effective overall. And so, like, I grew up on a farm. I can safely say I didn't use space at all in my day when I was a kid. And life still went on. The world still turned. We still got things done. But today, we are able to get more done. We're able to do it more effectively because we have this infrastructure. And we're never going to go back to doing it the old way. This is just more effective and efficient. I think that's important that we kind of shift our mindset to that. All right, when you're talking about, Brad, the Northwest Passage, defense, and monitoring our coastlines comes to mind for me. So let's jump over to Catherine. Maybe you can give us a little bit of your perspective on the defense and security point of view and space-based Earth observation.
Thank you, Jeremy. So bonjour, good morning, everyone. DND is also a very large user of space-based Earth observation, SBEO. Now, in the defense context, we we refer to SBO more like either as imagery intelligence, IMIN, in which we exploit and analyze this data, or geospatial intelligence, GeoWin, in which we use that imagery, but we georeference it on the Earth. And of course, space-based data is what we use the most to do IMIN and GeoWin. Or sometimes you might use it's also part of what we call space-based ISR. So ISR is intelligence surveillance reconnaissance. So different terms, but really using space-based data. Now, subject, the unit I'm commanding right now is the Canadian Force Joint Imagery Center. And what we do there is we deliver IMINT, imagery intelligence and geospatial intelligence, mostly to serve defense and national security interests. And that includes, of course, supporting our Canadians that are deployed, but as well supporting the other government department and our allies as well. And I would like to point out that the subject has a large team of public servants and our civilian imagery analysts. Space-based Earth observation is absolutely key in monitoring our coast, like when we're talking about the Arctic and just the length of coast that Canada has. So, and again, in the defense context, we often refer to that as a maritime domain awareness. And it's actually, Canada is a leader using space-based imagery to do that. We use radar type data extensively because, again, like Jeremy mentioned earlier, you can see through clouds. And then we combine that with the AIS, Automated Identification System, which is a signal that ships over a certain size are mandated to broadcast. Now, in the last few months, we've started using RCM data, same as the other departments, so a great success story for Canada. And as many people on the line will know, is that on each satellite of the RCM constellation, there's actually two payloads. There's a synthetic aperture radar, a SAR, as well as an AIS payload. So it makes it much more easier to fuse that data and enable what we call near real-time ship detection. So and basically, so it makes it a lot easier to know which ship we might want to have a second look at. For example, those ships that we can see in the SAR image, but that are not necessarily broadcasting. So we, of course, work closely with our Coast Guards and Department of Fishery and Ocean to ensure the safety and security of Canadians. Now, DND also support other emergency situations through the exploitation and the analysis of the space-based Earth observation data, such as forest fires, flooding, of course, search and rescues. And we also produce maps and geomatic products, digital elevation models. We also have a team looking at that. Now, as per our defense policy mandate, national defense also works very closely with our allies and partners. And we are, similar to the other government department, very heavily dependent on allied satellite constellations. But we are, of course, looking at ways of contributing, such as with RCM, and also to ensure that we guarantee the access to the data that we need to meet our mandate, and also like increase the resiliency. And it's also a part of what we call the space mission assurance, ensuring we have access to data and services that we need. I would like to also point out that DND is investing in research and development and new technologies, helping Canadian industry develop niche capabilities, supporting key challenges, like, for example, in sensor development, in data management, machine learning, artificial intelligence. So we're very much dependent on SBO data. So yeah, thank you.
All right, excellent perspective there. Obviously, space is just becoming a huge aspect of defense. And again, it's a trend that we're going to see increase, not decrease. And there's a lot of challenges ahead for space from a defense point of view. So thanks for helping to highlight that for us, Catherine. All right, let's jump over to a question. So any of you can jump in on this. So here we go. Canada has clearly started as a leader from a research point of view in the satellite world, but what are we currently seeing, or what we are currently seeing a transition. But the question is, where are we actively supporting the economy with remote sensing? So who wants to tackle that?
I don't mind jumping in, Jeremy. So yeah, the economic perspective of SBO is really important, of course, right now, as we're in a time where we're all focused on the economy and how it's changing. There are over 2,400 firms in Canada that rely on satellite data, and probably more than that if you look at geospatial a little bit broader. It accounts for 10,000 jobs in the aerospace industry, and then if you expand that to more downstream companies, it's probably another 10,000 jobs. So really, we do have a big, thriving private sector that's capable of providing a lot of solutions from space, and it's important that we focus in on that aspect, especially right now. It's not maybe intuitive to think about investing in space right now when we've got a lot of issues happening related to the health sector and our tourism industry, for example, that is arguably in need of some help. But if we look at it a little bit more holistically and look at the full value chain of SBEO, so we're not just talking about satellites and building satellites and putting them in space. We're talking about the receiving that data and the analytics and processing and storage and developing value-added products to make really important decisions related to a lot of the topics that have been covered already, but particularly for climate change-related aspects. So climate change is happening, in spite of the pandemic and all the challenges that we're facing right now. So investing right across the value chain provides a lot of opportunities for Canada and Canada's economy, right down to the downstream component where we have a real need for highly qualified personnel to really get the maximum value out of all that space data. So from an economic point of view, it actually makes sense investing across the full value chain.
Yeah, some wonderful points there. Fully agree. And, I've never viewed space as Canada's #1 priority. As Canadians, the fabric that stitches us together is taking care of one another. And of course, we're always concerned about the immediate priorities, of which space has never been one. But I think what you're highlighting is that it actually is woven into a lot of the solutions that we need today looking forward. Whether you're just looking at the jobs perspective, these are jobs that are going to be there, and they're futuristic jobs. They're jobs in the future. And if you can export solutions, that's even more jobs. And then there comes down to the other priorities that we need to work on, things like climate change and health and telemedicine and investing, like you said, these are your words, Shannon, but investing in this makes sense because it will buy down the cost of solving these other challenges. So we just have to make sure that space is part of the solution set, part of the toolkits that we offer decision makers. And most importantly, it is a complex area, so we have to make sure it's part of the conversation. Anyone else want to jump in on the economic benefits before I move to the next question? All right, so given the importance of open data to drive innovation and productivity and build our knowledge advantage, what can the government do to ensure open access, government-funded EO data to our private sector and academia, akin to approaches adopted by Cyprus in the EU? So open data. Thoughts on that?
I can step in here, Jeremy. Frankly, just to make more data open. We've seen not just in Earth observation, but we've seen wonderful things happen in terms of innovation and productivity and solutions when we make data open and we bring more people to the data. So we don't produce it and leave it in a silo that only a certain group of, say, government scientists can access or academic scientists. When we break down those walls and we get the data out there and open, history tells us tells us that we're going to be much better off across the board in terms of all stakeholders Earth observation, and rightly open data, and it extends beyond satellite data, but open data has been a priority for the government in Canada for some time now. As we talk about moving forward in terms of making foundational investments around space-based Earth observation, that is a principle, that is a priority to make as much data as open as possible. And in Canada, in most countries, that sometimes when you talk about Earth observation data, it's a balance against security concerns and also the values of values by open data. But I think if we take that position as open by default first, and then work backwards from there, I think we'll be in a I think is the right approach for Canada.
Yeah, definitely some great truths in there, and I'm glad you highlighted the defense national security point of view, and just the way you frame that. I mean, we need to be clever, but we also have to enable the economy in our country to take this data. And that's what's so amazing about it, is these data sets, new solutions can come out, and this is where we see most of the jobs is in the applications sector. So there'll be lots of jobs as well in building the infrastructure, building satellites, designing satellites, doing the science. We've always done those things, but now there's new potential for applications, more applications, kind of an explosion of applications from some of the conversations I've had. And I think that is really neat, but it does require access to data. And I know in the conversations I've heard of the Canadian Space Agency, this is a significant priority for the agency. Lots of work has been done, but there is a lot of forward work as well. But people now have new access to RadarSat constellation data, and those doors continue to be open, but in a way that takes care of our security concerns. All right, so next question I had come in is, how can we better leverage EO to monitor climate change in the Arctic, given that it is warming at over 2 times the rate of the rest of the world? And can we expect an open Northwest Passage as early as 2035? So I kind of suspect, Shannon, you have some thoughts on the first part about the climate change in the Arctic. I remember you educating me a little bit on this and what some of those impacts are. And so what kind of EO data would help us understand that evolving Arctic?
Yeah, thanks. It's a really important question. It's one that's important to Environment and Climate Change Canada. We know what's coming down the pike in the Arctic. We know how it's changing. We know how the ice is. We know that we have a large amount of methane and carbon dioxide trapped in the permafrost up there, which is melting and likely to release into the atmosphere years down the road. But knowing these things that are coming in the next decade or so, we have an opportunity now to make decisions that will provide us with the data and information we need 10, 15 years down the road. So, space missions, satellite missions take an average of 10 years to develop. So it's important that we make decisions now so that we have the information we need in the future. And at Environment and Climate Change Canada, we have great data resources from space for the what I call the equatorial area. So that's north and south of the equator from a geostationary orbit that provides with the weather information that we need up to about 50 degrees latitude. When you go north of that, we really don't have nearly the same temporal frequency of data that we get in the southern latitudes. So there's a real opportunity to look at a mission, and there is a concept study that's underway to look at a new mission that would provide that kind of data over the north and give us that very high temporal frequency over the north for weather, for greenhouse gases, for air quality, and also for space weather. So what that does, it's a game changer when it comes to weather forecasting, because we'll all of a sudden have the data we need over the north. For average Canadians, it will make a difference to our weather forecasts. It will certainly make a difference to our northern and Indigenous communities who would get improved weather information in their regions. So it's really, there are a lot of potential space mission concepts under development. This is one of them, and I think it's a real opportunity for Canada to really demonstrate leadership in this area, which we talked about the global community when it comes to space-based Earth observation, and I think there's a large part of the population of the world that's looking to Canada to step up in this area and provide some leadership in terms of filling that observation gap over the Arctic.
And
great stuff there. I was going to ask you, Brad, about the open Northwest Passage. So I think we started at the same time. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So the general consensus, as Shannon said, like it is, the ice conditions are getting easier in the summer. That's for what regards to ice concentration. So you would think that that would mean that there's a lesser need for icebreakers in the north, but actually what it is actually increasing our business in the north, increasing the need for icebreakers and Coast Guard presence in the north. Increased traffic means more chances of search and rescue demand, environmental response demands. The Arctic waters are not charted well, so now we need to look at our partners with CHS and what implications that's going to have for increasing the amount of data on the bottom in the Arctic. And we're installing multi-beam sonars on all our icebreakers so that we're basically, as we're breaking ice and moving through the Arctic, we're basically mapping as we go. That's just a new initiative and something that we're going to be working on as we go. Our partners with the Navy, they have new AOPS coming out. They're going to be in the north as well, more so in the summer. So there's going to be more traffic in the Northwest Passage, meaning there's going to be more work to do up there. And what's happening is we're finding that ships want to go now because the ice is getting a little bit easier. They want to go earlier and they want to stay later in the Arctic, which stretches our icebreaking fleet even further. And then again, throughout all this, we are using space-based data, RadarSat mission images daily, again, to monitor where the ice is, where the problem areas are in the Northwest Passage, because even though we say what they say is no ice-free Northwest Passage, there will be lots of ice in there come fall and winter. So we're still going to have to be there. It's not a year-round thing. You may see an easier place to get through in the summer, but it's definitely one of the most harshest environments I've ever been in. Lucky to be up there a bunch of times over the years on various icebreakers, and I was even fortunate enough to make it to the North Pole in 2015 on the Terry Fox doing bottom mapping with for UNCLOS, looking at just doing sonar data up there with the Louis Saint Laurent and the Terry Fox over a multi-year mission in the mid-2010s. And we use satellite data the whole way up there, looking at our daily shots on where we could get through the easiest, because those ice conditions up there are quite intense on times.
Yeah, and Jeremy, if I may build on that, so of course, like National Defense is very seized with the climate change and the impact to Canada and what it means, how we're going to better protect, how do we make sure we're prepared to defend and protect, right, the whole all limits in our water as well. So there's, of course, the element of the search and rescue. I mean, I was in Trenton in our search and rescue squadron there, and went to the Arctic, and there's been some mission, we lost someone. I mean, those are very very harsh environments, and I echo what Brad said, like this is also going to impact our resources. And then of course, as far as the ice melting, more people wanted to go through, and how do we ensure that it's like our economy, right, sustained, but also we know there's a lot of countries that are looking at the Arctic, and how do we keep that maritime domain awareness, and that establish our sovereignty and all that. So it's a very important piece for D&D and the CAF as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we're getting close to the end of our time today. Of course, there's never enough time to really frame all of this, but let's take one last question. Space observation satellites are obviously important to the functioning of our country. SBO must generate incredibly large data sets that are difficult and time-consuming for people to analyze. Very true. So is Canada experimenting with the use of AI or machine learning to give us additional insights from this critical source of data?
Jeremy, I could maybe jump in to talk just briefly about that. So the world is a complicated place. We have a lot of space-based data as well as in situ data. And I think of AI as sort of a data engine. So there is a credible amount of research going on, I know in agriculture and I'm sure my colleagues as well on the panel. So AI is sort of that data engine to allow us to harness all of these data, their different resolutions, different sources of data. And some of the research in agriculture I can speak to, AI has been generating some pretty incredible results for us. And I think we're just going to see more of this. It's a really powerful tool to harness all of that data.
I can quickly add to Heather's points. There's really a couple things in EO driving the quick adoption of AI. One is that we're getting asked much more difficult questions about historically what's happened with Canada. So this means being able to efficiently go back through petabytes of data, 30, 35 years of data very quickly and efficiently. And the only really way to do that is to harness machine learning to pull out some of those status and trends. It's a lot of the work that's being focused on in our lab at Natural Resources Canada. The other thing driving it is the explosion of data coming down on us. So no longer do we have workflows in Canada that focus on one satellite or two satellites. Suddenly we have constellations of data coming down. And in the past where we've relied on more people looking at images, we need to have more automated ways of interrogating that imagery very quickly, because we don't want any of the data to end up in a bucket, and we want to say we're using all of the data. And the only way we can do that is to use more machine learning, machine-based approaches, and automation, just so we can get to the best answers.
Yes, so much room for innovation, and something I hope the audience today is government will have to lead. There's a lot of potential here for Canadians on their own, build companies, build solutions, build exports, but we have to lead. And even we haven't talked about it today, but another big challenge is the regulatory environment. And so companies need to choose today what countries they can set up in based on the regulatory environment and how quickly we're able to adapt that environment. And work is I'm proud to say work is going on in that front, good work in Canada, but we can't be complacent. As a government, we're leading the ability of Canadians to leverage these decades of experience that we have, and so we've got to be hungry for it. Listening to Shannon talk about orbits, I thought just before I wrap up the orbital connects in less than a minute. And so maybe this will give you some insight into how space is changing. But if you had satellite TV before, you had a dish that you pointed at a satellite in space, and you didn't have to move that dish. That's because those satellites were around the equator of the planet in an orbit we call geostationary. It's about 36,000 kilometers above the planet. And those satellites don't move. As we turn, they turn, and so they don't move with respect to us on the planet. And that's with those, you've got regional solutions. GPS is about halfway that distance, and it covers the entire planet. A lot of the solutions that we're talking about today, we use something called a polar orbit, where you put a satellite around the poles, and then the Earth spins underneath it. And so one satellite can eventually map the entire planet in that orbit. So it's a very critical orbit. And now you may hear that we're going to have high-speed internet from space. It's already being delivered. Canada also has a really neat solution for this that's been funded and supported by the government that's coming as well. And the way that this is enabled is by a network of satellites in low orbit covering the entire. And so these trends to smaller, cheaper satellites and larger networks makes these solutions much more global than they used to be when you would park a satellite in geostationary orbit. So these are big changes in the space industry. Well, as we wrap up today, I hope that you did your homework. I hope you kept your ears open for the things that I feel are really, really important, and that is the demand for space data will only increase. And we're shifting from regional solutions to global solutions. And this is enormous opportunity for Canada. We have lots of expertise and lots of data, the ability to create applications that can solve problems not just for our country, but globally. So there's tremendous potential to serve Canadians while generating jobs of the future in this growth sector, which is expected to triple in the next 20 years. So this is nothing short of a strategic opportunity for Canada, afforded by decades of innovation, science, and a huge number of pioneers, some of whom have joined us today to educate us, and we appreciate that. So let's look forward. Canada needs to be seeking to create a vibrant, sustainable Earth observation. We need to be making evidence-based solutions. And when you think of climate change, for example, if one country decides to tackle climate change, that's great. But we really need countries around the globe to get together to have a shared set of information to make decisions on a shared set of facts. Space data is going to be critical in order to convince a global community to make changes, big changes to address climate change. Canada is and can continue to play a leadership role on that front. And I guess let me close just a sincere thank you for our panelists today. You've put a lot of energy into educating us, but more importantly, you put a lot of energy into solving problems for Canada. And I'm humbled by everything you've done in the space domain. And finally, to you, our viewers, I'm so appreciative of the fact that you would take an hour out of your day to broaden your perspectives on this very, very important subject for Canada. I hope that you will continue to learn in this vein and to help educate decision makers so that we're bringing space into the conversation, into the solution set more often, because this is the way we will solve problems, or one of the ways we will contribute to solving problems of the future. Thanks very much for your time today, everyone. Wishing you all the best. So long.